Well, good morning, everyone, or afternoon. It's morning where our author is today. I want to welcome everyone to University Express. We're so happy to have you here with us today for our virtual class called The Buffalo Mafia, Gangsters, and Organized Crime in Buffalo. For those of you who are new to our virtual programming, you are not being shown on the screen to anyone, and your voice is not going to come through on the program. If you would have a question for the author, there's a little chat button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It looks like a comic book bubble almost. You can type your messages in through there, and I will be monitoring that during the course of the program. And hopefully we'll have some time to get to those questions after class today. I want to quickly um, give you a little background on our author. Michael Rizzo is originally from Buffalo, New York, where many of his 12 books are focused. He now lives in the Pacific Northwest with his family. He started writing when he researched and wrote a social history of the 1893 home he had purchased. In 2005, he released his first book, Through the Mayor's Eyes. This book is the only one that I know of that chronicles the lives of all Buffalo mayors, and our libraries actually use it as a reference piece. Some other well-known titles Michael wrote include They Call Me Corny, which is a historical fiction book based on the true lives of the Polish Corny gang in Buffalo during Prohibition. This is a fantastic story, and Michael did teach this for one of our University Express classes, and it's on our YouTube channel if you're interested in watching that at some point. Also, obviously, Gangsters and Organized Crime in Buffalo, which I have right here. It became a fast-selling book as soon as it was released, and I know who doesn't love a great story about our Buffalo Mafia, right? I wanted to also quickly mention Mike um, has a brand new book as of last year called 15 Minutes Bamboozled in Buffalo. It's the story of the Green Lightning, which has a whole bunch of interviews he did. It is fantastic. For those that don't remember that story, it was a piece of art that was built in downtown Buffalo when Mayor Griffin was in office, and I think it was only active for about 15 minutes and they shut it down. So it's the whole story and all the background of that. Really great book about Buffalo history. And it's available at Barnes and Noble if you want to check that one out. But in the meantime, I'm excited today to turn things over to Michael and we can all learn more about Buffalo's Mafia. So
Well,
take
good
it away,
morning,
Michael.
afternoon. It's morning for me. It's only 9 o'clock here. But thank you for taking time to come and visit with me. We're going to talk about the Buffalo Mafia, organized crime in Buffalo. This was my, I think, third book. Came out in 2012, maybe fourth book, and it's now in its 10th printing. I didn't know that. I still have some copies of the original first printing, but I saw it when I was actually in Buffalo, and it's in its 10th printing. So this is by far my most popular book, and everybody loves this topic. I've done this multiple times here. And when I was in Buffalo, I had walking tours. If you've been on any of the Explore Buffalo walking tours, especially the Allentown Mafia or Allentown Mob Tour. I'm not sure what they call it. That's my tour. I wrote that, I created it. And when I left Buffalo, I offered that to them. And there's a West Side one also. And those were ones that I created. And I used to do walking tours. And also I did a bus tour in Niagara Falls, which went through Niagara Falls up to Lewiston. It was a very cool tour. Covered all of the locations that the Buffalo / Niagara Falls Mafia lived, and where they lived, and places that they frequented. So I wrote this story originally because I have Italian background. I had a girlfriend once who told me that something that she was related to Stefano Magaddino, which I could never find any proof to that, or never find any books about it. So I just decided to do the book myself, and that's why I started researching it and wrote this book. I also I have three novels, and one of them, Double Rush, includes a lot of mafia stories from Buffalo that are they're the same stories, but I changed dates and times, but basically the same stories, and I incorporated them with a bunch of stories that I had from being a bike messenger in Buffalo. I was a bike messenger for 7 years, so I wanted to combine all those stories together and make an interesting book. And like was mentioned, this book, 15 Minutes Bamboozled in Buffalo, came out in May of this year, and it is about Green Lightning. Billy Lawless, the creator, who had the Dancing Neon in downtown Buffalo. It's where Catholic Health headquarters is now. So that is my newest book, and it's a pretty cool book, and took a lot of work. Spent like a year and a half writing that one, but it's very cool. So, what we're going to do in today's program, we're going to give you a little overview of the Buffalo Mafia, the Buffalo family, about Stefano Magaddino. I'm going to joke each one of my birds. Um, Talk a little bit about unions, a Rembrandt painting, beauty salon, and a whole lot more. I think I talked about the beauty salon. If I don't, we'll get back to that. So first off, what is the Buffalo Mafia? Well, it's a secret society of Italians. And to some, the mafia is a myth that never happened. I can't tell you how many times people have either emailed me or come up to me and said, there's no such thing as the mafia. Everybody just says that it's a pretend society that, all these movies and books and everything that's been written around it was all because of just, some people that had vivid imaginations. But I've read enough and I've talked to enough people to know that it is a real thing and it is still alive and kicking. The mafia in Buffalo started in the early 1900s with some Italian immigrants. Early leaders included Angelo Puma, Angelo Palmieri, Joe DiCarlo, and Stefano Magaddino. Buffalo's Little Italy was in the Canal District on the waterfront, down where the Erie Canal terminated, where if you've been down to the refurbished area, that whole area down by the arena now that they've turned into a wonderful tourist and entertainment area, that's where Canal Street was in Dante Place. So here is a hierarchy of the mafia family in general, and this also basically worked in Buffalo. First of all, you have the boss, the guy at the top. His consigliere was his right-hand man, his lawyer, his advisor. The underboss was the one who did a lot of the work. He's the one who then had these capos beneath him. Capo generally meant he had a crew of 10 soldiers. So each capo would have like about 10 soldiers, which were guys that did a lot of the work. And then at the bottom were the associates. These were guys who were not mafia members. Sometimes they weren't Italian. Generally, everybody above associates had to be Italian in some way, on one side of the family or the other. And usually it was on the mother's side. It had to be traced back, and it had to be traced back to Sicily to be technically mafia in the early days. So that's how all these things uh, lined up. So what would happen was the guys at the bottom doing all the dirty work, robberies, burglaries, whatever they do, they make the money, they give it up to the soldiers, who then hand money up to the capos, who then hand it to the underboss, who then hands it to the boss. So money gets constantly goes up. Nothing ever goes down, except trouble. Everything goes up, and the belief is that many of these men were rich. There you see sometimes in the movies you would see driving around in Cadillacs or Lincolns and things like that. And yes, some of them did. Excuse me, but a lot of them didn't. Guys at the very bottom, if you've seen some movies like Goodfellas or Donnie Brasco, you know that a lot of those people didn't make money. They were scraping by just to earn anything, and a lot of times they had to pass that money up to their boss, and and they were left with nothing. It was a lot of it was about being the prestige of being a mobster. So let's see what else. So I mentioned a few of the people like Angelo Puma and Angelo Palmieri. These were early leaders. They all hailed from Castellammare del Golfo in Sicily, and this is also where Stefano Steve Magaddino came from. Beautiful area. Went there on my honeymoon. Went to Italy on my honeymoon, and we spent some time in Palermo. Took a bus down to Castellammare. Beautiful area. Um, they're they've had mobsters in their midst for decades and decades, so nobody there trusts anybody. I was surprised that the way that it worked. It was kind of funny. We would be walking, and people would open their shutters, watch us walk by, and then close the shutters. It's just a interesting area. So this area here is the Dante Place area. And this was where the early Italians in Buffalo arrived and settled. It was where Angelo Puma was in power. He was supposedly involved in different crimes, such as blackmail, which is a form of extortion, in which the threat is to expose embarrassing and damaging information about somebody. He was also involved in things like extortion, obtaining money or property by threat to a victim's property or loved ones. It was an intimidation factor. They would, threaten people with all kinds of things, or they would claim that they a false claim of a right to something. And this was a lot of the way things worked back in the early days. Next, of course, one of the biggest things was gambling. This could have been the Italian lottery, illegal casinos, high stake poker games. Unfortunately, they often targeted their own people, and that's usually how it works. So, Joe DiCarlo is thought to be the first boss, the so called mafia boss in Buffalo. Angelo Palmieri is thought to be by some to be his top lieutenant, or probably like an underboss or consigliere. So DiCarlo moved to Buffalo about 1908 from Brooklyn. With Palmieri, they extorted money from grocers, food vendors, and pushcart vendors. So this was considered like the black hand type things back in those days. Joe DiCarlo Jr. Was expected to take over from his dad, because what happens is in 1922, Joe DiCarlo Sr. dies. Angelo Palmieri had already moved to Niagara Falls, and he left DiCarlo to run Buffalo, but just a couple of years later, he dies. So Junior here, he's like, well, I'm going to take over. But something stood in his way. This guy named Stefano Magaddino. He got a nickname called the Undertaker, born in Castellammare del Golfo, and he was living in Brooklyn in 1922. Prohibition was in full force in the U.S., and Angelo Palmieri decided to contact Magaddino, who was part of this band of, he's a young guy, 1922, band of criminals called the Good Killers. And he wanted to know if Magaddino was interested in coming to Buffalo. These are the Good Killers here. On the far left is Stefano Magaddino. He's got the bandage around his head. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people in the picture. 5 of them were criminals, and they were suspected to be part of a nationwide murder ring, which was not true. They were involved in because back in this day, the government either didn't want to believe or didn't believe that there was any type of conspiracy, any type of criminal ring, and the mafia was this, and it was in many cities around the country. From New Orleans to California to the Midwest to Chicago to, of course, New York, where the 5 families were. So Magaddino had been arrested in this good killers thing in 1921. He was released after 30 days, and he decided when Palmieri contacted him that it would be a good time to leave New York City. He moved to Buffalo. He was there for a short time, and then he moved to Niagara Falls, where there was a large Italian population, and many were from his hometown in Sicily. So it made sense that he would want to be around people that would respect him, I guess. So during Prohibition, Magaddino made millions of money selling illegal liquor. He claimed that he and his cousin, mobster Joe Bonanno from New York City, had 40 trucks on the road, and he was making $10,000 a day in illegal gambling. This is in the 1920s, 20s, 30s. $10,000 a day. I'm sure anybody here would take that today. Now imagine what that's worth in today's dollars. That's worth a lot more. So he ends up taking over a funeral parlor in Niagara Falls, and he had many police on his payroll because police were not paid well. So if they were offered something, they would often take it.
Look, Carol, I want you to rest well, and a month from now, this Hollywood big shot's gonna give you what you want.
Too late. They start shooting in a week.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
I'm sure most of you have heard that or seen that. That was Stefano Magaddino. He made people offers that they couldn't refuse. There is a story, there's a scene in The Godfather where Michael is at the hospital because the Don is he's in, I don't remember what, and a quiet scene, and this guy's walking around with flowers and everybody's nervous. And there was something very similar that happened to Magaddino when he was in the hospital one time. They thought that somebody was coming in to probably to take him out. But interesting how some of these things took place. So these are the type of crimes that the mob would go on to do over the years. It was gambling, murder, union takeover, local 210 in Buffalo, and I forgot what local is in Niagara Falls, but the laborers local in Niagara Falls too. They would do loan sharking. Today, you could add things like crimes like debt collection, stock swindles, anything that they can make a buck at, especially with the internet now. So on November 14th, 1957, about 100 men met at the home of Joseph the Barber Barbera. He was in Appalachian, New York. He was a guy that worked for Magaddino. I don't know if he was an associate, a soldier. I don't remember exactly what he was. But this meeting was organized at Magaddino's request by Vito Genovese from the Genovese family in New York City. They decided to meet there. It was kind of in the middle between New York and Buffalo. So they met there. Barbera, he ran a soft drink bottler, distributor, and met at this beautiful home he had. What happens though is State Trooper Edgar Croswell happened to notice that there were a lot of cars visiting his town, and he was curious why. Found out that Barbera's son, Junior, ordered like 100 pounds of steaks and stuff, so they knew something was going on. So Croswell just starts taking notice of license plates. He called for backup, and when one of the guests saw that there were police in the area, the guests all flipped out, grabbed their belongings, and just took off. A lot of them jumped in their cars and left. Some of them ran through the woods. Magaddino was not caught. Believed that he was one of the ones that was able to get away through the woods and hide out long enough until he was able to go and get back to Niagara Falls. But caught there were 60 different men from around the country, including James LaDuca, who was Magaddino's one of his son-in-laws, and John Montana, who at one point was a council member, city council member in Buffalo. And up to this time, nobody knew it, but it's believed that Montana may have been the underboss of the family. So I believe that he was his right-hand man. He also ran Madison Cab Company, which had exclusive rights to the Central Terminal. There were still, if you had gone over to the Central Terminal, you could still see painted on like the concrete. It said like Madison Cab Parking or something like that. He had been named Citizen of the Year by a police fraternal organization. So there's a lot of things that tie all this stuff together. And from Montana, a big business owner, this wasn't good news. So he decided to step away from the mafia after this incident, and he was let go. This is not something that's normally allowed because mob, you are stuck for the rest of your life. They don't just let people walk away because you know too much and you could turn out to be a rat, and that's not something they would want. So this whole Appalachian thing led the FBI to finally say, J. Edgar Hoover's like, all right, maybe there's something going on. So they started making these charts of each family that they could figure it out. And as you can see, you got Stefano Magaddino at the top, Montana off to the side. Excuse me, off to the side. So I think they assume that he is his consigliere. Then you got Fred Rendascio below him, and then these other people like John Campbell and Roy Carlisi. And then you go down further, you got Joe Fino, Ron Fino, his son. Well, hold on one second. Joe Fino, at one point in the late 60s, early 70s, would become a temporary boss of the family. And his son, Ron Fino, actually ran Local 210 as business manager for years and was an informant for the FBI. So a lot of these things and some of these people's houses you could see on the walking tour in Buffalo. I don't know if any of these guys, but some of these people were. And a lot of stuff happened. 1936, this was a home on Whitney Avenue in Niagara Falls. In May, a bomb ripped through this home. This was right next door. To the left of this house was Magaddino's house. This house was where his sister Arcangela lived, and her home, her husband Nick Longo, who worked for Magaddino, he was not there, but she was killed when the explosion went off, and her three daughters were injured, and this sent shockwave to the family. Magaddino, if this was either after Longo or this was something towards him. So what happens is, a month later, believe that Frank Lotempio in Buffalo, he was working out of Batavia at the time. He was being pressured to send a cut of his money to Magaddino, and he didn't want to. So a few weeks later, Lotempio was gunned down in front of Holy Cross Church here in Buffalo, or there in Buffalo, while he was attending. Rumor has it that he was the one behind the bomb, and that was actually the reason that he was murdered, because of Magaddino assumed that he was behind it all. So there were plenty of murders either directly attributed to members of the Magaddino crime family or associates. There were murders during Prohibition as rivals fought over territory, and murders over drugs and money and power were often the reason. There was a series of murders in the 1950s which led to the Aquino brothers. Fred and Frank Aquino, they ran a lucrative bookmaking operation in local factories, along with an involvement in a burglary ring. These guys were all part of this burglary ring working for him, or for the two brothers. So it's believed that Magaddino sent his underboss, Fred Rendascio. Rendascio lived in Buffalo on the west side in the Elmwood area. So he ran basically Magaddino was the boss, but he was in Niagara Falls, and Rendascio ran Buffalo, which was the bigger city. So Rendascio had a lot of power. And it's believed that Magaddino sent him to pay these Aquino brothers a visit and say, hey, it's time that you guys need to, you're making a lot of money, and, the boss would like to see a cut of that, or most of it probably. So they refused to pay tribute to Magaddino, and in September 1958, they both disappeared. Frank was found in his mother's car. He had been beaten and shot, and Fred was found in a field. He had been tortured, and acid had been poured over his head. These were the kind of things that the mafia and the Magaddino family and Fred Rendascio and his associates, the Palmieri's and such, this is what they did. Now, I'm going to play you a little clip here. Does anybody know who this is? Or have you ever heard this?
long hours just for sitting in school. Complicated books make me feel like a fool. Chicken food make a man wanna shout. The bell started ringing and school turned out in the street. You're my queen. After the ball. The night begins at 4 o'clock.
All right. If you haven't heard that before, it sounds very much like a lot of popular songs from the 1950s. It was a song by the man on the left here, Charles Bobby Milano Cacci. Bobby Milano, my dad said he knew him. He had been, he was on the West Side. He lived on the West Side. His family, the Cacci's, lived on the West Side. And Bobby Milano used to be out on the street corner singing, and he was a good singer. So what happens is in 1955, he decides to move out to LA because he wants to be a star, and never became a star. That was one of his songs. He put out about at least a half dozen songs over the years, but never wrote it, never released a full album, never made it as a star. He did marry Keely Smith, and for years they would still perform in Palm Springs out in California.
Hi, everyone. Could someone just send me a message through the chat if you can still hear me? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we're trying to get Mike back online. Now, at least I confirm the problem is on his end. And he's in a different state, far away, as most of you know. So just give me 1 second to try to get him back on. You're back.
Oh, yeah. I have no idea what happened.
Okay, no problem. This darn technology. I know it better than everyone, how the problems happen. So we can
All
start
right.
right back off where we left off. And guys, I'll edit out that little break. Um,
All right. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Um, and now my notes are a mess. So hopefully, let's see. So the Kachi brothers were running things in for Buffalo in Los Angeles. So what happens is, there we go. 1964, December 1964, this guy, Pasquale Petty Calabrese, decides to rob Buffalo City Hall. So he robs Buffalo City Hall and he gets a big haul, goes into hiding. So this guy, Steve the Whale Chino, comes and visits him and he says, "Hey, Fred Rendascio would like to meet you. Obviously, you know, you got some skill. We want to see if we can do some more things with you." So Calabrese says, "All right, you know, I'll go on with this." But part of it was they also wanted their cut of the thing there. And so what happens is he goes to meet them and sends them. Steve the Whale Chino goes out to California to L.A., where the Kachis are, and he ends up meeting with the Kachis, and they decide that they're going to pull off a couple of these hotel robberies from wealthy visitors, and that's how they're going to make some money. And what happens is Calabrese finds out that he's been identified in the robbery because I don't believe he wore any mask or anything, and he was identified finally by someone, and he decides that he's going to go turn himself in because Fred Rendascio says, "Hey, turn yourself in, you know, and everything will be good." Well, what happens is he turns himself in and he's sitting in jail. He's got a wife or a girlfriend at the time, I think, and you know nobody's helping him out. And finally, he's like, "You know what? These guys aren't doing anything for me, so why would I want to do anything for them?" So what happens is he decides to join or give up Randascio and these other guys, and it turns out that they uh, end up getting arrested, and everybody gets arrested as part of this. And the Kachi brothers in 1967 both ended up serving time, and they would eventually be tied into other crimes, and including Steve Chino was involved in the Fed Herbie Blitzstein murder that's depicted in the movie Casino. So all of these things are tied together in some way here. So here's another story. 1976, Buffalo cat burglar and safecracker Charles Chucky Carlo was convicted of possessing burglary tools. They offered him probation in return for being an FBI informant. He reluctantly agreed, and he became the operator of the House of Tasha in this building here on Elmwood Avenue in Allentown. This antique store was a front that included hidden cameras and microphones. His contacts in the crime world worked, and he slowly but surely started bringing in stolen goods, and people were starting to bring stuff to him, and all of this stuff was on camera and on microphone. In 1971, three small paintings were done by famous artist Rembrandt, and they were stolen from. I'm sorry, they weren't in. They three famous paintings done by him. They weren't done in 1971. They were stolen from this small museum in France by a Robert Lebec, who was a French art student. He was no mastermind, and it was a simple robbery. It was in a small museum that didn't have security guards, anything like that. Lebec met his childhood friend Jacques Fedit in Amsterdam, and they attempted to sell the paintings. Well, this led to a German man who was arrested with two of the paintings, and he ended up flipping on Lebec. So this is Rembrandt himself. Now, what happens is police confused who was the thief, who was the dupe, and Lebec was let go. Now, Fedit eventually got this last painting and traveled to Canada, where it was buried an hour from Vancouver. And this is the painting here. It was there that he met this guy, Johnny Rio Gandolfo, who was hiding in Canada to avoid charges in the U.S. Gandolfo wanted a piece of Fedit's drug business, and the two tangled several times. So Gandolfo heard about the stolen Rembrandt, and when Fedit left Canada to make a deal, he was able to get it. The story gets better and comes full circle all the way back to Buffalo, where Jerry Fasolino was a frequent customer of Chucky's at the undercover fence operation. Fasolino was a career criminal with arrests dating back at least to the 1950s. He was involved in bookmaking, stolen goods, and a lot more. So Fasolino said he could get his hands on the stolen painting. So Chucky was interested, but Fasolino said he wanted a cut of the sale. So the tie to the painting was Fasolino's daughter was dating Johnny Rio in Canada. 3 months later, there was a meeting held with Chucky, Johnny Rio, and Fasolino. Chucky agreed to let his buddy, this guy Thomas McShane, who was actually an undercover FBI agent and an art expert, examine the painting before they agreed to purchase it. So McShane met Chucky at the house of Tasha on Elmwood Avenue and attempted to determine if this was the authentic painting, the rabbi. After painful examination, he declared with 95% certainty that it was actually the real deal. When McShane met with Rio, he was expecting $250,000. McShane convinced Fasolino that the painting was actually a study for a larger painting and was only worth $22,000. So he took it and walked away. Because the art recovery was part of a larger fence operation, Rio was let go. After 2 days, the FBI lost him, and 3 months later, the operation was shut down. There were many arrests related to what was called Operation Teepee, including an assistant DA, a county legislature, an attorney, and a bunch of mob characters. After a long delay, the painting was eventually returned to a much more secure museum in France. In 1976, there's this whole thing with this guy, Faust Novino, and John Sacco. This is John Sacco here. So Frosty was a criminal, and he had issues with, he wasn't a mob member, but he had done burglaries and stuff, and he probably sent, some money up, but he was a rogue, nomad. Sacco was a made member of the Magaddino family. So what happens is one guy convinces Frosty that he had some burglary tools at this place over on the west side on Connecticut Street. So they go to this place and they go in. Place is dark. Before Frosty realizes what's going on, there's all this commotion and gunshots and people are running, and turns out it was a setup and they were trying to get Frosty. And it's believed that it was for a previous shooting or something, or a bad drug deal. So Sacco was behind it. He was involved in it. He ends up, Frosty Novino, he's quick on his feet, pulls his gun, ends up shooting, takes off through the back door, and he takes off. John Sacco ends up getting hit. They drag him outside, leave him on the front stoop of the building, and everybody takes off. So the police are called, of course, because there's a bunch of gunshots going off. And when the police arrive, Sacco's sitting there and he's bleeding, and they're like, "Hey, Sacco, Johnny, who shot you?" And he's like, "Nobody shot me." And he's laying there, with a good bullet wound, and he never would give up who he was. And John Sacco eventually he's arrested. He flips and he tells a whole bunch of information, but then the police are never actually sure if anything he's ever saying is true. He ended up dying in prison. So here's another one: heroin smuggler, drug smuggler Albert Aguechi. He was a Sicilian. He was living in Canada. Magaddino and all of the main mob members, which Magaddino was one of the founding members of the mafia families in the United States. So he had as much power as anybody in New York City, even though he was up in Niagara Falls. So what happened is anybody that did any work had to pay tribute to Magaddino. And Albert Arguello was making money and involved in this big heroin ring. And he was making money and giving it to Magaddino. So John Papalia, he was the guy who ran Hamilton, Ontario for the Magaddino family. He was a direct connect. And through the years, there's a lot of killings that go on in the Hamilton, Toronto area, all related to the Magaddino family. So Papalia contacted Agueche and he says, hey, we want to make sure that we're part of this and we're making enough money out of this. And by 1958, there's 32 people involved in this complicated drug ring that runs through Sicily, and I think it goes through France and comes through Canada. And one of the people involved in this is also an informant. You know, every time somebody gets picked up, if they don't want to do hard time, a lot of people are willing to become informants, and that's what happened. So a lot of people were arrested, and this guy here, Joe Valachi, I'm sure a lot of you had heard about him. He was a career criminal in New York City. He was also part of this heroin smuggling ring. So in the late 50s, he went to prison on a heroin charge. He was released on appeal. An associate ratted him, and so he took off and he left the country. So he ended up meeting Albert Agueche, and then they were working on this drug ring together. So of course, you know, they're criminals, and you know, mistakes were made. The drug ring was broke, and you may have heard this, and you may have seen the movie many years ago. It was called The French Connection. This was all part of this French Connection from the early 70s. So Agueche, Pops Papalia, were arrested in 1961 after two men flipped. Agueche is in prison. He's expecting Magaddino to provide an attorney. His wife sold her house to provide some bail money. So what does he do? He jumps bail. And he decides that he's going to meet Magaddino. He contacts the family and he says, hey, I'm coming up to Niagara Falls. I want to see Magaddino personally. I want to talk to him. Well, he never made it there. He never made his meeting. He was found dead near Rochester. He had 40 pounds of flesh cut from his body. He was tied. He was burned. And it was believed that Fred Rendascio was directly responsible for this. So Valachi, he's in jail through all this. He thought, while he's in jail, Vito Genovese was in jail too. One day Genovese comes up to him, you know, and Italians, a lot of Europeans, they do, you know, the two kisses on the cheek. Well, Valachi took this to be the kiss of death. So he is, you know, beside himself, and he thinks that he is going to be killed in prison. So when this other prisoner comes up to him, he thinks this guy is going to take him out. So he beats the guy to death. That was not what was happening. And what happens is Valachi now is a lone man. He murdered this guy. The mob is against him. So he ends up flipping, and he becomes a top informant, one of the biggest ones that have ever come out up to this point. Everybody's heard about the Valachi papers back in the the 60s and 70s. They made a movie with Charles Bronson, and he testifies, and he ends up staying in this military prison in Texas until he died in 1971. But over the years, he had made this friends with this woman in Niagara Falls who is her name was Mary, and they were just good friends. And I don't know if they were lovers or anything. She stayed in contact with him. She contacted him. I believe she visited him in Texas too. But when he died in 1971, his family wanted nothing to do with him. Nobody claimed his body, so she did. And he is buried in Lewiston, New York. And when she died, she actually was buried right next to him. And at first, it was an unmarked grave, but later on, after Magaddino and things had calmed down, he ended up has a little marker on his site. So Joe Todaro. So Magaddino, 1974 64 dies. Late 69, he had been arrested with a bunch of other people, and his health went down. And that's when Joe Fino took over, and some other people took over. Joe Todaro had been one of his soldiers over the years, and he was a hard worker and all this thing. Well, he ascended pretty quickly, and Todaro took over as the boss. Uh, Nobody believes it. The man was never arrested. He was never convicted of anything. Everybody knows Nova Pizza, his son. They ran the Buffalo Mafia. There's, without a doubt, they ran the Buffalo Mafia. And there's been nothing ever proven to say that they were, but he ran it for, him and his son ran it for decades. This is Joe. He is sitting, his son Joe Jr. is to the left standing. This is from the late 50s or early 60s at their pizza place, Lenova, the first one in Tonawanda. So that gives you an overview. I mentioned that there was wasn't sure if I'd have enough time. Peter Piccolo. Peter Piccolo had been some of you might remember the Peter Piccolo School of Hair Design. He was an associate, I think, of the family. He was into drugs. I think he was doing drugs. He was taking drugs, selling drugs. He was involved in something, and he had several places over on Elmwood, including a hair salon. And one day, they come in and his employees, and they're setting up and for the day, and somebody ends up finding his body in a different room. He had been shot and killed. Believe it was tied to a bad drug deal with the mob, and there was a lot of things like this. For years, you used to hear a lot of mob hits and stuff in Buffalo, especially going back to the 50s and the 60s into the 70s. Things like that calmed down a lot, and there's not as much of that kind of stuff. But this book, if you like this history and you haven't read it yet, you can pick this up anywhere in Buffalo online. This book has more stories, has more details, has tons of names. There's also a whole section in the back that has names, dates, addresses. If you want to go out for a ride one day and check out where a bunch of things took place, where a bunch of people lived, that all is in there. And this book here, Bamboozling Buffalo, is about, excuse me, like I said, Billy Lawless and his sculpture Green Lightning, which was a shock to the city of Buffalo, put on city property for free. The city offered it, and was put on the property when it was lit on this week, November 15th, tomorrow, 40 years ago tomorrow. It was lit for the very first time, and what happened was when it was lit up, they didn't expect to see dancing neon penises, and that changed the history of Billy Lawless for sure. So that would happen. This book, tons of detail, spoke with a lot of people, lawyers from both sides, all kinds of things. It was a 7-year legal battle. Billy Lawless won, but he lost. So a lot of stuff. But also mentioned earlier about They Call Me Corny, about the Polish gangsters. That story, if you're interested in this similar kind of, gangster stuff, that is Billy Shalino. I see. I missed the one question about Rizzo. There's several Rizzos that I came across when I was doing the story. One of them was my father's cousin. He was actually like the money man when they'd have like illegal casinos or high stakes, like poker games, thousands of dollars. He was the guy who would take the money at the end of the night or hold on to the money. Yep, he was one of them. Somebody mentioned Billy Shalino. That was all during the construction of the light rail in Buffalo, and he was killed in a trailer right on Main and Ferry, I believe, somewhere right around there. And that was a hit that was definitely related to. I don't remember the exact circumstances. It's in the book. I did have people contact me and told me I was lying, but I know other people who said that yes, it was definitely mob related. So yeah, that was that is in the book. And like I said, there's a lot of other stories. There's more details on a lot on the unfortunate murders, but there's a lot more details on a lot of people, dozens of people that were murdered by the family over the years that they could tie, but they could never tie to some of them to ever put them in prison. But other questions? Club Rendezvous. Club Rendezvous. I'm not sure. I don't know. Roseland, yeah. Oh, Roseland, that isn't here. Club Rendezvous, I'm not positive about. Roseland, that was John Camilleri. He was a no-show job guy that ran, um, worked for Local 210. And when they were building what is now, is that New Era? That's where New Era's headquarters is. That was, or no, the building over, it's a hotel now. It was the federal building. That is, yeah, New Era is where the Federal Reserve was. The building down the block is where the federal building was. That was, when that was being built, a lot of union and no-show jobs. Camilleri was part of that. And on his birthday, 70, early 70s, 74 or so, he was outside of Roseland and they shot him and killed him. He was, they considered him to be a troublemaker. Stories in the book. A lot of details about that and some photos. Were there any other
I
questions I missed?
I did want to add that he's got a lot of really great photos in here, and in the very back, um, there's dates and it lists all of the history. Um, so you can look up by name. I know you guys have a lot of questions about events and specific people. You probably can't see it here, but there's a whole note section that has a lot of really great information. I have an original too, Mike.
Oh, good.
Original book. So, well, this was really fantastic. I hope everyone enjoyed the class. Oh, actually, we do have one more.
Yeah.
What a couple more questions here.
Oh,
Was
sure.
Natarelli really known as the ice pick?
Oh, yeah, there was I think it's Pat Natarelli. Yeah, from what I understand, I again, this is a rumor, but from what I've been told is that he had used an ice pick on people before to kill them. So, yeah, there are a lot of those like that. What
And then
else?
we have Mr. Rizzo. My name is Nicholas Tadaro, and I think you've done a great job recovering the history up to Joseph Tadaro Jr. Can you tell me anything of what happened after that point in history? Secondly, in Elvis's song Jailhouse Rock, he mentions the Purple Gang.
Hmm.
Was that Purple Gang the mafia from Detroit that had dealings with the Buffalo Mafia for real?
My guess is yes. I didn't know that, but yeah, I'm guessing that that's the Purple Gang from Detroit. And yeah, the Buffalo family, they tied with a lot of, especially, I mean, we tied with stuff, or they did. I wasn't part of it. They tied with stuff in New York City, but they did tie with, Canada and Chicago and Detroit. People have always told stories that Al Capone used to come to town. He used to fly into town stuff. I've never found any proof of any of that. I mean, it's possible he came to town and he used to go to some of the clubs downtown and stuff. That is entirely possible. Um, but the Tadaros, after things quieted down, I'm sure everybody's seen the news there in the past year or so. The mob has perked up again, and there was a lot of stuff tied to some strip clubs out in Williamsville or Cheektowaga, and these are relatives of the Tadaros that all involved in all this stuff. But a lot of the stuff I mentioned earlier, they do a lot of like stock swindles and stuff like penny stock, and they like dump and pump things like that, and debt collections, and a lot of that stuff is the stuff that has sustained them over the years. Because it used to be like they would rob, a truck full of furs or TVs. That stuff you probably, because years ago you'd hear, oh yeah, this fell off a truck. I got this, half price or whatever. Though that's where those sayings come from. But I haven't heard of a lot of that type of robbery. It's been more of the online stuff where, they will start calling people that got this stock that, you know, it's only 50 cents, and they call people and they get people to buy it, and it's called pumping it, and they pump it up until it's worth a couple bucks. And then all the people that are involved in it, they dump all their stuff. They make their profit, and then all the people that they had suckered, they lost everything that they put into it. So that's something that they're involved in, and still, I'm guessing still, because I worked at Geico for a while in Buffalo, and I worked with a woman who was a professional poker player, and she knew some of these people, and she used to go to some of these games. So this was back in the 2009 area. So I'm guessing that, you know, a lot of that kind of high stakes poker stuff goes, you know, those games still happen. They used to have full blown like little casinos, like in garages and stuff in the back in the day. I don't think they do that kind of stuff anymore, especially since there are real legitimate casinos now. But the, you know, the high stakes poker, football cards, I'm guessing they still have those. That used to be big in the plants. You know, you'd pick your four teams that are going to win that week based on the, you know, the odds, and put a buck down. My dad did that one time. He had put $10 down on one, and he won. And when he got it back, they had crossed off the zero on the 10, and it was a one. You know, who's he going to complain to? You know, so. But yeah, those are the kind of things that over the years have kept them going. Sorry about my technology problem earlier. I think my Wi-Fi freaked out.
No problem at all. So great news, everyone. Mike is going to come back in the spring. So we'll have another great lecture online virtually with him. He gives of his time to take part in our classes. So I really do want to thank you. You're such a fantastic addition to our speakers. And thank you for being here with us today. Yep, they're already excited about your next one, Michael. So see what a star you are at University Express.
Thank you.
Um,
Appreciate it.
th Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Michael. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you all real soon.
Bye bye. Thanks.
Bye. Bye, everyone.